Hi, everybody. Great to see you today. Yay. I'm going to start in a minute or so. I'm still a couple of minutes early, or maybe I guess just a minute early, but I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Thanks for joining. Really excited to talk a little bit about E2s for Canadians today. However, even if you're not from Canada, you can ask a question. Not a problem. Just happy to answer any of your E2 or E1 questions. But we'll give everybody just a few more seconds here to join. I hope you guys are having a good time today. All right, let's get started. Welcome everybody to the YouTube Live. Today we're going to be talking about Canadians and the E2 and E1 visa, although feel free to ask questions, even if you're not from Canada, no problem. But today is a good day. I can already tell. There's soccer on TV. There's been more soccer on TV in the last week than in the last year. 4th of July is right around the corner. You guys are excited to come to the US, and we are so excited to have you, and I'm excited to help you. So let's do it, right? Let's talk a little E2 and a little E1, whether you're from Canada or somewhere other than Canada. We'd still love to help you. So just keep in mind the chats are open. Feel free to ask any questions that you want. I'll get to as many as I can. I probably won't get to everyone. That's typically kind of how it goes, but I'll get to some. Some people ask repeated questions, and so I'll be happy to answer the best that I can and as many as I can. Let's get started. So what's going on in the summer of 2026 with E2 visas? I will say so far, so good. There was a little bit of a hiccup at the US consulate in Toronto as far as scheduling. We've seen this before with Toronto. Sometimes I believe their system gets a little wacky and it won't allow for interviews for a super long time. And then they fix it and then the interviews come back. So if you are one of those people who has already applied for an E2 in Toronto, and they said, oh, your interview can be in like November of 2027 or something, get back on, log back in, do this a couple of times a day, and you're going to start seeing cancellations and you can pick up earlier interview dates. Okay. That is something you can do at any consulate, really. All right. Sometimes it's more possible than at other in some consulates, a little more possible than it is in consulates of other countries. But just keep that in mind. If your interview is super far out, it's okay for you to go back in and try to find cancellations. And most people do. Most people can shave weeks or even months off their interview wait time by doing that. Now, where can you not do that? London. Sorry about that. London London has different things kind of done a little bit differently. But if you already have an interview date and you want to shave off the time, keep logging into the system and try to find earlier appointment dates for people who have dropped. This is very common. Also, just keep in mind with all of this soccer, you may call it football, there are some slowing of visa interviews in Toronto and in Mexico City. Okay, just because there's so many people coming, U.S. citizens that are coming to those countries to watch soccer, and they like to keep that open. That happened in Paris with the Olympics as well. They stopped some temporarily for a couple of weeks, stopped some non-immigrant visa interviews in order to give more time to deal with U.S. citizens that are coming to those countries for those huge events, things like that. So just something to keep in mind. Stay flexible is the main thing when dealing with the consulates right now. Now, what has changed for the E2 visa in 2026? The requirements are still exactly the same, right? We are starting to see some trends where they're getting maybe a little stricter with the real and operating and marginality requirements. Okay, so something to keep in mind. So something that we are starting to recommend is showing a little bit more in revenues before applying. We've always said that you should have some revenues. Now we're wanting to show just a little bit more. Now, does that mean you need to make 50, 60, $100,000 before you apply? No, we're generally recommending. Now, of course, a lot of this is going to depend on the type of business that you have, but generally recommending somewhere around $10,000 or so. Again, that really depends a lot on the type of business you have. Keep in mind, you have no authorization to work. So if there are revenues being generated, those are your US employees that are handling that. You are likely back in your home country, waiting to get some of those revenues going, letting your employees handle those things. Then we put the application together and send off to the consulate. Let's chat a little bit about the investment. I can talk about what type of investment we generally recommend for people. So we're always going to recommend at least $100,000 for even the most simple businesses, right? Now, what does invest mean when we're talking about E2 visas and E1? Well, E1 visas don't need any investment. There's a tip if you don't want to invest, check out the E1 visa. So the E2 visas do require a substantial investment. That is the requirement, substantial. It is not a specific number of any type, okay? So you will never find a number like that. You're only going to find recommendations based on attorneys, okay? So, based on attorneys' suggestions and their experience and that type of thing. So, some attorneys may even give you different numbers there. That's because they have their own kind of internal standards, what they think is going to give you the best odds of approval, but there is no number. We always recommend that you invest at least $100,000 into the E2 business prior to the application. Now, some people are a little confused about what is at risk mean, right? Irrevocably committed, these kinds of terms. These are some of the terms that float around when you talk about the investment. And really what that means is spent, essentially. There's one exception, but for most of you, that exception will not count. So in your mind, set your mind to this. I am going to have to write checks for $100,000-ish or more, depending on the type of business and that type of thing. But that's going to be your minimum. So just set your mind to that. Get used to that reality. And I think it's going to really help you in your E2 visa application process because substantial investment is one of the key requirements. They're all required, of course, but that is one of the main reasons for denials. Now, remember, most E2 visas are approved, but when there are denials, substantial investment tends to be one of those main reasons for denials. So it's really, really critical that you invest a substantial amount. Okay. All right, so let's chat a little bit here. Let's see what we have. For a Canadian applying for an E2 with an e-commerce business, if there are no employees and only third-party contractors, because those contractors' expenses count toward qualifying E2 investment. So I would not recommend any of that, actually. Canadian applying, yes, but if you do operate an e-commerce business, keep in mind you're still going to have physical location in the US, right? Customers should be in the US. You're definitely going to need employees. We always recommend you have at least one employee on W-2 at the time of application. Okay. Now, why would I say that? Why? Who cares what the business is, right? It's legal. That's really the only requirement aside from having a tax designation of for profit, which is almost every business, frankly. The reason is this. You go to the interview and it's an e-commerce business and you don't have any employees, they're going to go, this looks great. You're making great money. Just stay in your home country and run it from here. Right? So we've got to make those connections to the United States. So we always recommend, first of all, for sure, you're going to need your own warehouse, not 3PLs, okay? You're going to need at least one employee minimum. Also, we usually recommend in things like that you either are selling wholesale as well. So you have US customers that are buying larger quantities of whatever it is that you're selling, or that you sell on consignment through a retail shop or have a retail presence somewhere. So one of those may fit for you, but keep that in mind. You really need a US presence. So just simply having a website, using a 3PL, and having a couple of contractors, I would say your odds of approval on something like that would be not to the level that I would want. Right? I wouldn't want that type of business. I wouldn't feel great about the approval. So keep that in mind. As far as the contractor expenses, sometimes we count contractor expenses. Usually it's in these, first of all, they have to be US based. Second of all, we usually want contractors to be a business of some sort. So an LLC or a C Corp based in the United States that does some kind of contractor thing. Third of all, it can be for the growth of the business, but it really shouldn't be for the operations of the business, if that makes sense, right? So if you have let's say you do have a business that has a website attached or an e-commerce platform, you're having a contractor company build the website, fine. But having contractors actually run the business, we don't normally recommend that, at least to start, right? So consider that. Let's see. Canadian freight brokerage business with a few U.S. customers, been in business 10 years. Is it the best to open a branch in the U.S. or to buy an existing one? Well, here's what I will say. If you have a Canadian business with a lot of US customers or clients, you may want to consider an E1. I have a few shorts about that, and I think you could get kind of the gist of an E1 within about 5 minutes watching those 3 shorts. But generally, an E1 says, hey, I have this Canadian business. I've had it for more than a year. I have substantial trade with the US, meaning I have US customers or clients in the US, and normally our recommendation is that you have at least $200,000 in revenue from those US clients within the last 12 months. You have multiple US clients, and your goal in coming to the US is to get more US clients for that Canadian business. That may or may not be exactly what you're looking for, but it might be something to consider. And here's why. No investment needed. No employees needed. We're looking for ongoing trade that is going to grow. So please keep that in mind. Look up a couple of those shorts that I did on E1 visas, because those might be a good option for you. They're usually, the documentation is lighter. It's usually a faster process, no investment. So look into that a little bit. And please email me if that is something that you're interested in. Happy to talk a little bit about that. Oh my gosh, what else? Have any contracts or do you provide service with helping buying an existing business? Oh, no. So immigration attorneys, keep in mind, whenever you're dealing with an immigration attorney, they're going to be dealing with immigration, okay? Not with writing contracts, not with finding a business, not with negotiating a sale or anything like that. That's a separate attorney. So another step back. So in the United States, immigration is federal. That means the rules are the same if you're going to be living in Florida or Hawaii or Vermont or Washington State or anywhere else, all the same. When you're talking about contracts, the rules or the laws are different state by state. So whatever you're doing regarding if you're going to be negotiating a sale or a purchase, if you're going to be signing contracts, leases, things like that, and you need a review for contractual reasons, you need to hire a local corporate attorney. Same goes for entity formation. Oh, I want to have an LLC in this state. I want to do business in that state. That can all be done. And we will let you know the documents we need for that, right? But we don't do that because we do immigration. Plus, it is possible that you will be going to a state that we are not licensed in anyway. So you need a state licensed local attorney in that state to do those types of things. If someone is in the US on an E1 employee visa sponsored by the Canadian employer, how can they legally, hold on, how can they legally be paid if the Canadian company does not have and prefers not to create a US entity? A lot of E1s don't have a US entity, but that would be something. If you already have that, you should definitely speak to your lawyer who helped you get that E1, because that's going to be critical. I mean, you would know a lot more about the books and the accounting, certainly, than I would on this. But a lot of people who do E1s never have a US entity. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let's see, what else do we have here? So far, we have a few people asking questions, some asking many. Give me just a second here. Would a freight brokerage be viewed favorably because of my industry background? Can I initially operate with only myself and wife, later hire staff, as we both own 100 shares of the company? So keep in mind a couple of things. The US government, when dealing with E2 visas, is interested in essentially 2 things. 1, your investment. 2, your ability to hire US employees. These are the 2 most critical pieces to this visa. Okay. That's where you need to spend the most time, the most effort, and let go a little bit. And I know as entrepreneurs and business owners, none of us like to spend money we don't need to spend. None of us like to hire people before we need to hire them. But that's the name of the game here. Okay. Hiring your wife, hiring your husband, hiring, some other, well, usually those are the things. They're not interested in that. Not interested. Right now, eventually you do. Once you get the E2 visa, you need to come down here and run this business. But the employees, oh, I hired my wife, who's also a Canadian citizen or also a French citizen or whatever. No, that doesn't help you at all. They want somebody else. They want to see you're hiring US citizens or green card holders to handle this business with you, right? So keep that in mind. You've got to let go of, I would normally never hire someone in this position, to this is what I'm going to have to do to get this visa. Okay. So keep that in mind. Question about borrowing money. Can I take a loan from a friend? I have been living in the US for the last 2 years on a TD. Yeah, you can have loans from people for sure. We do a lot of family loans, right? Oh, my brother gave me some money, that type of thing. So a couple of different things. We like you, the investor, to have, our recommendation is always that 20% of your investment comes from your personal savings or sale of your personal property or whatever, right? We just don't want some person to give you $100,000, then you spend $100,000. We would prefer if you had at least 20, in that case, if you were only going to be investing 100, that at least 20 of it came from your personal savings. They show you have skin in the game. You are truly interested in this. As far as who can loan you the money, technically it can be anyone. However, they may ask, and it needs to make sense. So if it's your mom, okay, that makes sense, right? Your mom's giving you some money, whatever, helping you out, fine. If it's a friend, could be fine too. But what if it is a friend who is about the same age as you and it looks like you might be dating? That gets a little stickier. Why? Because the officer may go, oh, so your boyfriend's giving you money. Does that mean that your boyfriend wants you to be in the United States and doesn't want to marry you yet? But once you get down here, then you'll get married, right? We kind of get into this weird area off the beaten path of the E2 visa. So kind of keep that in mind. If it is a friend who is loaning you the money, point is, they may ask, who is this person? Why did this person loan you money? Are they in the business of loaning money? Also keep in mind the source of funds. So sometimes, depending on a variety of factors, that person is going to need to supply their tax returns to this application. They may not want to share that with the Department of State or the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know. But keep that in mind too, that those people will be, they're not going to be on the hook, but they will probably have to provide some financial documents that they may or may not be that interested in providing. So just keep that in mind too. Sole proprietor company in Canada working as a marketing consultant. Great. I have a contract with a US company. The parent company is from India. The US company is a subsidiary. They have offered me to run their marketing in the US. I was thinking trade visa as TN doesn't make sense. Well, I mean, here's the deal. I mean, as far as an E1 goes, there has to be a Canadian, it has to be an entity owned by Canadians that trades with the US. So maybe has to be, and you would have to be coming here, if you're an employee, you would have to be coming here to fulfill like a sales and marketing role to increase the trade between Canada and the United States. So I'm not sure about that. If the ultimate owners are Indian, it may not fit for anyone. You'd have to figure that part out. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here? If we pay a manufacturer in China from our US e-commerce business account, can those payments be counted as qualifying E2 investment since many e-commerce businesses rely on overseas? Sometimes. So we have a few recommendations about that. First of all, they must be physically located in the United States at the time of application. So you will need to include shipping documents, maybe even pictures of them within the US warehouse. Those must be included. We always recommend too that you do not include more than, if it is a business relying on inventory, which it sounds like it is because you claim that it's an e-commerce business. We usually recommend that if you are buying things from outside of the United States, it's no more than 50% of the total investment coming from outside of the United States. And again, you do need to include shipping documents. Those and to show those items are here physically located in the United States. Okay. So keep that in mind too. And again, At least to begin, it might be worth buying more stuff here in the US. Might be worth it. Just consider that. Okay. Let's see. Let's do. Can you keep renewing? Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is kind of our final. I can't believe we've been going for 19 minutes already, guys. Thanks for hanging in. I know it's a lot of time to be talking about these visas. I know. Let's see. Where I just lost the question that I was going to answer. Oh, can you keep renewing E1 or E2 visas indefinitely? Yes, you can. As long as you and the business continue to fit all of the requirements. I'm confused where there's no limit, but there's also the temporary spirit of it. Yes, it's true. Sometimes we refer to these as wobblers, right? So it's a single intent. That's what we call it, a single intent visa. You cannot intend to immigrate permanently to the United States. That is true. However, you can continue to renew indefinitely as long as you and the business meet the requirements at each time that you renew. I know it doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's the rule. So anyway, so let's see. Angie, I'm a CPA in San Francisco. Can I contact you? Anybody can contact me. No problem. No sweat. So with that, we're going to wrap for today. However, you may have other questions that we didn't answer. You may have other things you want to talk about. That's great. You know how to reach us. Online, on WhatsApp, on email, all of the above, and keep checking back. Obviously for YouTube, we post videos typically on Tuesdays and Fridays. This week I got busy and I didn't post one on Tuesday, but I'm going to post one tomorrow. Okay, so please check back frequently. We're answering questions all the time via video. And of course, email us if you've got questions about your E2 visa. We'd love to speak with you about your E2 and E1 visa. Have a great day, guys. Go soccer.